Imagine standing on the shores of an ancient sea about 500 million years ago. Back then, the climate was warm and the air was rich in greenhouse gases. The sky overhead shone a vibrant blue, unclouded by smog and pollution. Vast oceans stretched beyond the horizon, and the sunny shallows were bustling with prehistoric life. In these rich ecosystems, strange and fascinating creatures scuttled, swam, and walked along the seafloor as life diversified like never before. This was the Cambrian period, a dynamic time on our planet that began about 541 million years ago. The Cambrian saw dramatic shifts in our planet's climate and geography, but it's best known as a time of unprecedented biodiversity. During the Cambrian period, most major groups of animal life appeared for the very first time in the fossil record. The majority emerged underwater, where critical stages of animal evolution yielded innovations like exoskeletons, segmented bodies, and specialized appendages. These advancements led to extreme diversification and speciation across a relatively short span of geological time. Because life diversified so quickly, this event is famously known as the Cambrian explosion. Before the Cambrian period, most life forms were relatively simple. Multicellular life existed on our planet, but organisms were more basic, with soft bodies and low mobility. The first multicellular animals, or metazoans, mostly drifted with the currents or attached themselves to the sea floor, passively feeding by taking in nutrients from the water. There were few, if any, complex ecological relationships like those between predators and prey. But eventually, environmental changes laid the groundwork for an explosion of diverse life. When the Cambrian period began, greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide, permeated our planet's atmosphere. Estimates suggest concentrations of carbon dioxide in the range of 4,000 to 7,000 parts per million. That's more than 10 times higher than levels today. All that CO2 in the atmosphere triggered a powerful greenhouse effect, which trapped heat near the surface. As a result, our planet was significantly warmer. Average global temperatures rose to an estimated 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, about 5 to 10 degrees higher than the present day. Around the world, sea levels were high, and the oceans covered low-lying areas, creating vast, shallow seas. These shallow areas were rich in nutrients and warmed by radiant sunshine, making them ideal ecosystems for photosynthetic organisms. Aquatic plant-like organisms performed photosynthesis, but were otherwise primitive compared to the lush flora we have today. The first vascular plants did not emerge until millions of years later, so there were no complex structures like roots, stems, or leaves during the Cambrian period. Our planet had no trees, vines, or flowers. Instead, most species were structurally simple, reflecting the early stages of their evolution. Green and red algae, though technically not true plants, were prevalent along coastlines and also lived in deeper waters. Extensive mats of microbes spread along the seafloor, along with early stromatolites, which served as habitats and food sources for prehistoric animals. These photosynthetic organisms played an important role in the Cambrian explosion, and without them, life may not be as diverse as it is today. As microbes and algae converted sunlight into food, they produced large amounts of oxygen as a byproduct. Before the Cambrian period, the concentration of oxygen in our planet's atmosphere was lower, making it more difficult to sustain diverse and complex life. However, as populations of photosynthetic organisms expanded, they pumped more and more oxygen into our planet's atmosphere and oceans. Oxygen levels increased during the early Cambrian and contributed toward the flourishing of new life. But notice that we're talking about marine life. That's because, 500 million years ago, life lived almost exclusively underwater. Fossil evidence suggests that land plants did not emerge until about 30 million years later, during the Ordovician period. As for animals, the first tetrapods did not waddle into the open air for another 80 million years after that. While it's possible that some organisms explored beyond the water's edge, Cambrian life was predominantly marine. Earth's landmasses may not have sustained life, but they still played a key role in this explosion of biodiversity. Before the Cambrian period, most of Earth's landmasses drifted together into a possible supercontinent called Pannotia. The potential merging of these continents would have obstructed waterways and closed coastlines, shrinking marine ecosystems. Luckily, Pannotia's existence, or near existence, was relatively short-lived. After about 50 million years, the supercontinent gradually broke apart into 4 continental blocks: Laurentia, Siberia, Baltica, and Gondwana, which was itself a supercontinent. As these land masses drifted away, new waterways opened in the spaces between. At the same time, sea levels were rising, flooding new coastlines and creating more shallow ecosystems where life could flourish. While the movement of Earth's land masses created ecosystems, it also divided existing ones. During the Cambrian period, some marine ecosystems became increasingly isolated from one another, forming distinct communities of aquatic flora and fauna. This geographical separation was another significant driver of evolution. Geographic barriers forced organisms in different parts of the world to face new conditions and ecological challenges, resulting in what's known as allopatric speciation. When isolated by physical barriers, like mountains or oceans, organisms tend to adapt independently to their unique environments. As isolated populations change over time, they become genetically diverse and often evolve into distinct species. Similar evolutionary pressures caused a vibrant animal kingdom to emerge on our planet, including early members of most major phyla of animal life. Although these creatures are distant relatives of modern species, few would have resembled marine animals as we know them today. If we could travel back in time and observe these ecosystems firsthand, we might not recognize our ancient relatives in their earliest, most experimental forms. Many common creatures during the Cambrian period were found burrowing in the sandy seafloor. Cambrian worm-like creatures, such as priapulids, had long bodies similar to some worms today. However, many also had unique features not seen in modern worms, such as armored bodies or complex mouthparts with hooks and teeth. Many were detritivores and scavengers, so they fed on organic matter that fell into the ocean sediment. These organisms played an important role in their ecosystems by breaking down and recycling nutrients. Swimming in Cambrian seas alongside various worm-like creatures were early chordates, such as picaia. Early chordates included the ancestors of modern vertebrates and their closest invertebrate relatives. These small fish-like organisms had notochords, flexible rods running along their backs that provided structural support. Early chordates also had segmented muscles and primitive nervous systems, giving them a significant evolutionary edge over other marine animals. Brachiopods were another prominent and diverse group during the Cambrian period. Superficially resembling modern clams, brachiopods had hard shells made of calcium carbonate, which protected their soft bodies from predators. Most Cambrian brachiopods used stalk-like structures called pedicles to attach themselves to the sea bottom, usually in shallow, nutrient-rich areas. There, they filtered out plankton and organic particles from the water, using specialized feeding structures called lophophores. Brachiopods weren't the only hard filter feeders latched onto the ocean floor. One of the first reef-building organisms, called archaeocyathidds, emerged about 525 million years ago. These were sponge-like animals with hard, porous skeletons made of calcium carbonate. Like reef builders today, some species of archaeocyathid formed sprawling colonies along the seafloor that acted as three-dimensional habitats for other marine life. By creating these habitats, they greatly enhanced the diversity and productivity of marine ecosystems. Among these reef systems lived early members of the phylum Cnidaria, the group that includes modern jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones. These organisms were mostly simple and soft-bodied, though scientists disagree on their exact shape. Some believe the first cnidarians were sessile polyps attached to the ocean floor. Others say these organisms were free-swimming medusa, like jellyfish today. These creatures would have been predators in their ecosystems. They likely had tentacles with specialized stinging cells to capture plankton and small prey. In response to predation, some animals developed defense mechanisms, like shells and exoskeletons. Perhaps the most iconic were small armored invertebrates called trilobites. These extinct animals ranged in size from a few millimeters up to half a meter in length. In addition to hard exoskeletons, many trilobites had sharp compound eyes and specialized appendages for swimming and walking through marine sediment. Their bodies were also segmented into multiple lobes, allowing them to move and adapt to various marine environments. But even trilobites were not entirely safe from the larger hunters that patrolled these ancient shallow seas. One of the most formidable predators during the Cambrian period was Anomalocaris, an early relative of arthropods. 500 million years ago, these sophisticated marine hunters were among the largest living things on the planet. Their bodies stretched up to half a meter from tail to claw, and they possessed many key advantages over other marine life. Their segmented bodies were long and flexible, allowing them to move efficiently and turn sharply underwater. However, their most striking features were large spiny appendages, which they used to capture and pull prey towards their circular mouths. Inside, their mouths were lined with serrated, tooth-like structures. This bizarre, alien-looking creature is often considered the world's first apex predator. Before the Cambrian period, few animals actively pursued their prey, but as ecosystems diversified, adept hunters like Anomalocaris began appearing in the fossil record. The evolution of new predators dramatically increased competition within marine ecosystems. Predators and prey had to constantly innovate and adapt to survive, launching a kind of evolutionary arms race between the hunter and the hunted. Of course, this arms race continued well beyond the end of the Cambrian period. Ecosystems continued to boom throughout the Ordovician period, which saw the emergence of coral reefs, sophisticated mollusks, and the earliest jawless fish. Eventually, ecological pressures drove the first animals to crawl from the shallows and experiment with life on land. From those early relatives came all the animals we know today, from fish and amphibians to mammals and humankind. In many ways, the Cambrian explosion knocked over the first in a long line of evolutionary dominoes. More than 500 million years ago, this burst of biodiversity changed our planet forever. These ancient ecosystems may have looked alien and bizarre, but without them, life as we know it may not be around today.